The camera came up before the question did, and that was the first thing I noticed about her. The lens found me a half-second before her voice did, the way a hunter's shadow reaches a rabbit before the sound of the boot. I was standing my post at the northeast gate of Harrogate Palace, on the granite step worn shallow by 100 years of men who had stood exactly where I stood, and I did not move, because moving is not what the post is for. "There he is," the woman said, angling herself so the palace railing framed her shoulder and the phone caught us both. "The famous statue. Let's see how human he really is." Her name, I would learn within the hour, was Delphine Marsh, and she had 140,000 followers who waited each morning for her to hand them a villain. She wore a cream coat too bright for the gray light, and her lipstick was the exact red of my tunic, which I do not think was an accident. She had the confidence of someone who has never once been told to stop. Behind her, a smaller man in a gray hood held a second camera low, framing me from the hip, catching the angle that would make me look either menacing or foolish depending on how the clip was cut. I looked forward. That is the whole of my job, described honestly. I look forward. I hold the rifle at the correct angle against my shoulder, the butt seated, the sling flat, and I let the world do whatever the world intends to do in front of me. The bearskin sits heavy on the brow. The chin strap presses a line into the jaw that stays there an hour after the shift ends. The white gloves are new each morning and gray by noon. None of it is comfortable and none of it is meant to be. Comfort is not the point. The point is the stillness, the promise, made silently to every citizen who walks past, that some things in the realm do not flinch. My name is Corporal Tomas Vayne, of the Household Guard of the Kingdom of Eldermore, and I had stood that gate for 11 years without once being the subject of a single sentence spoken aloud about me. That morning, that changed, and it changed in front of a lens, which is the modern way that a life gets turned inside out. "Come on," Delphine said, stepping closer. She had a way of speaking to the camera and at me in the same breath, so that I was less a man than a prop in a story she was already telling. "You've seen these guys, right? They're trained to ignore you, it's a whole thing. They stand there like furniture and let the tourists take their little photos. Well," she smiled, and the smile was for the lens, "I've never met a wall I couldn't get a reaction out of." The man in the hood made a small sound that might have been a laugh. She began then, the thing she had come to do. I want to be precise about it, because precision is the only honest way to tell this, and because in the days that followed a great many people described what happened who had not been there, and their descriptions grew wings. What she did was not violent. She did not touch me, not yet. She performed. She stood 18 inches from my face, and she performed contempt, the way a stage actor performs a storm, big and loud and aimed at the back row. She waved a hand in front of my eyes. "Hello, anybody home?" She snapped her fingers, 3 sharp cracks. "Blink for me, 1 blink. Come on, big guy, give the internet a blink." I looked forward. "They can't react," she told her audience, pivoting the phone to her own face, delighted. "That's the rule, it's their whole discipline thing. So the game, and this is the fun part, the game is you keep going until the machine breaks. Everybody's tried it. I'm going to actually get it." She turned the lens back to me. "First guardsman to laugh on camera. That's the content. That's what we're making today." There was a small crowd forming. There is always a small crowd at the northeast gate, tourists with folded maps, a school group in matching caps, a pair of pensioners who came most Tuesdays and stood a respectful distance back, and never once raised a phone in 11 years. Delphine's voice pulled them in the way a raised voice always does. Some of them lifted their own phones. I understood distantly that I was becoming an event. "Look at that jaw," she said, close again, her breath carrying the mint of a lozenge. "You could set a spirit level on that jaw. Do you practice? In the mirror, little Tomas practicing his big serious face." She had not, of course, known my name. She said it as a taunt, a placeholder, the generic name you give a man you have decided is generic. It landed strangely, because it was in fact my name, And for a moment I thought she had done research. And then I understood she had simply guessed a plain name for a plain man and gotten lucky. I looked forward. Here is what she did not know, standing there, spending her charm the way a rich man spends money he has never had to earn, that the stillness she was mocking was not emptiness. It was not the absence of a reaction. It was a reaction held. There is a great difference, and it is the difference that 11 years teaches you. A boy can be silent because he has nothing to say. A man holds silence like a stone held under water, with effort, with the whole arm, knowing exactly what would happen if he let it float up. I was not furniture. I was a man declining, moment by moment, to give her the thing she had come to take. And declining is an action. It is, in fact, the hardest action there is. "Okay, escalating," Delphine announced, cheerful as if narrating a cooking show. "Level 2, watch this. This always gets a flinch." She reached up and flicked the brim of my bearskin. It is a strange thing to have a stranger's fingers near your face when you have promised the realm you will not move. The bearskin shifted a half-inch, the weight of it swaying, and I let it settle. She flicked it again, harder, and this time a little gust of her manicure caught my cheek, not a slap, not a blow, just the careless brush of a woman who has decided your body is a surface. The crowd made a noise, a low collective intake. "Ooh, almost," she said. "I saw something in the eyes there, did you see it? Slow it down in the edit, there's a little something." There was not, but she would say there was, and the edit would provide it, and 140,000 people would nod. The man in the hood spoke for the first time. "Marsh, careful with the touching." "Relax, Gio," she said, not looking at him. "It's public property, it's practically street furniture." She laughed at her own line and made a mental note of it, I could see, filing it for the voiceover. Then she turned back to me and dropped her voice to something meant to sound intimate, though it was pitched perfectly to carry to every phone in the semicircle. "You know what I think? I think there's nobody in there. I think they hire men with nothing behind the eyes on purpose, because a man with a soul couldn't stand here and take this. So what are you, Tomas? Empty, or just a coward in a costume?" The word coward moved through the crowd like a stone through a pond. I looked forward. The morning light came off the gilded railing and lay in a bright bar across the cobbles. Down the mall, a bus sighed to its stop. Somewhere behind the palace wall, a clock I had listened to for 11 years cleared its throat toward the hour. And I felt in the pit of me, the old machinery turn, the machinery that in a different man, at a younger age, before the discipline was welded on, would have answered her. I knew exactly the shape of the answer she wanted. She wanted heat. She wanted me to become, for one filmed second, the thing she had already decided I was, an angry man in a silly hat. That was the whole product. My anger was the harvest. She would plant the insult and stand there with the camera and wait for the crop to come up, and the crop would be mine, grown from my own soil, and she would sell it. So I did not grow it. That is not nothing. I want to say that plainly, because the world tends to mistake stillness for weakness, and the two could not be further apart. To stand inside an insult and not water it, to feel the heat rise and refuse to let it show on your face, not because you feel nothing, but because you have decided your face belongs to the realm and not to her. That is a discipline that took me 11 years and a war to learn, and she was trying to strip it off me in 90 seconds for the entertainment of strangers. "Nothing," Delphine sighed to the lens, mock disappointed, and I understood she was building toward her finish, the way these things always build toward a finish. "Absolutely nothing. Folks, I hate to say it, but the King's Guard might just be as hollow as the hat. But," and here she brightened because she had saved the good part, the part that would make the clip travel, "I've got one more. And this one has never failed, not once." Gio, get in tight on his face. She stepped so close I could see the powder settled in the fine lines beside her eyes, the small human evidence of a face that was also, underneath the performance, only a face. She looked at me, and for just a flicker, so brief I might have imagined it, something crossed her expression that was not contempt at all. It was closer to a question. As if some quiet part of her, buried under the followers and the coat and the red lipstick, had noticed that the wall was not a wall, and did not know what to do with that. Then she buried it, and smiled her camera smile, and did the thing that would, within 24 hours, end the career she thought she was building. She reached into her bright coat and brought out a child's party horn, the paper kind that unrolls with a shriek when you blow it, the kind that leaves you feeling foolish the moment it goes limp. She held it up for the camera. "Behold," she said, "the wall's kryptonite. Loud, sudden, right in the ear. If there's a man in there, this finds him." I have been in places where a sudden loud sound at the ear meant a very different thing than a paper horn. I do not talk about those places, and I did not think about them then, because thinking is not what the post is for either. But the body remembers before the mind decides. That is the whole trap of it, and she did not know she had built a trap for herself as much as for me. She put the horn an inch from my left ear, and she blew it. The shriek was small and stupid and enormous in the closeness. The paper tongue unrolled and slapped my cheek and rolled back. And in the quarter-second after the quarter-second she had bought this whole performance to capture, I did the one thing 11 years and a war had trained into the deepest part of me. I did nothing. Not the frozen nothing of a startled man holding still, the trained nothing, the controlled nothing, where the flinch begins in the nerve and is intercepted before it reaches the muscle, caught and grounded like a current run to earth. My eyes did not close. My shoulders did not rise. The rifle did not shift a millimeter against my collarbone. I let the sound arrive and pass through me and leave, the way you let a wave pass through your legs when you have learned to stand in the sea. And when it was gone, I was exactly where I had been, looking forward at the bright bar of light on the cobbles. There was a silence then in the crowd that was different from the silences before. Before, they had been waiting to see me crack. Now they had seen me not crack, seen it plainly, seen the horn go off at my ear, and the man behind the face refused to be moved, and something in the arithmetic of the moment changed. The joke had a target, and for the first time the crowd was not sure the target was me. Delphine felt it. People like Delphine have an animal sense for the tilt of a crowd. It is how they live. She heard the silence sour, and she reached for the only tool she had left, which was more of herself. "Oh my God," she said, too loud, laughing too hard. "Nothing still. This is okay. This is actually broken. This is a broken man. Somebody check him for a pulse." She rapped her knuckles twice on my breastplate on the metal ribbons over my heart. "Hello, is this thing on? Are you even a real person under here, or did they just prop a mannequin up and go to lunch?" And there, on the ribbons, is where she made her mistake. Not a legal mistake, not yet. A human one, because the ribbons over my heart were not decoration. They were a record. The dark blue with the thin crimson stripe was the Cross of Valour, and a man does not wear that ribbon for standing still at a gate. He wears it for a night he does not talk about, for men he could not save and one he did, for a thing done under fire when doing nothing would have been so much easier and so much more forgivable. She rapped her knuckles on the proof of the bravest thing I had ever done, and asked the internet whether I was a real person. I looked forward. But I will tell you what happened inside, because inside is where this story actually lives. Inside, the old machinery turned all the way over, and then, this is the part I am proudest of, it stopped. It stopped because I remembered, in that instant, a thing my first sergeant had told me on a night much worse than this one. He said, "The people who will hurt you most are the ones who have decided you are not real. Do not become real for them by breaking. Become real for them by refusing to. Let your calm be the thing that reminds them you were a person all along, and let that be the thing they cannot bear." I did not understand it at 20. I understood it now at 39, with a paper horn's echo dying in my ear and a woman's knuckles on the metal I had bled for. So I made a decision. It was a small decision, and it would take 4 seconds to enact, and it would cost Delphine Marsh everything, though neither of us knew that yet. I decided that when the moment came for me to speak, and the post does allow it in narrow cases. We are not forbidden to speak, only forbidden to be provoked into it. I would not defend myself. I would not raise my voice or my hand. I would give her exactly one sentence, and the sentence would not be about me at all. It would be about her, and it would be kind. That was the whole of the plan. Kindness, said levelly, to a cruel person on her own camera. There is nothing in the world a cruel person can less survive than being treated gently in front of the audience she assembled to watch her be cruel. But the moment was not yet. A guard does not speak first, and does not speak into a jeer, and does not speak to be clever. He speaks, if he speaks at all, when speech becomes the discipline rather than the failure of it. So I held. I waited for her to make it necessary. And Delphine Marsh, who could not read the tilt of the crowd anymore because panic had closed her ears, made it necessary within the minute. Down the mall, unseen by her and unseen by me, a black car had turned in at the far gate. In the back of it sat a man who would decide, before the day was out, that the northeast gate was worth his personal attention. But that is Act 2, and I am getting ahead of the post. What happened next at the gate was this. Delphine, sensing the clip going flat, decided to salt it. She turned to the crowd, to the pensioners, the school group, the tourists with their maps, and she made me their business. You know what the worst part is, she called out, spinning a slow circle so every lens caught her. We pay for this, your money and mine. We pay to keep a man standing here doing absolutely nothing, contributing absolutely nothing. A grown adult in a fur hat playing statue while real people work real jobs. And he won't even give us the courtesy of a reaction. That's the arrogance. That's what gets me. The arrogance of the man who thinks he's too important to acknowledge you exist. It was, I noted with a distant and genuine admiration for the craft of it, a perfect inversion. She had spent 5 minutes performing arrogance at me, and now she stood in the wreckage of her own failed cruelty and accused me of it. She had come to the gate to take a reaction and been given nothing, and rather than accept that the nothing was a kind of answer, she had decided the nothing was a crime. A young man in the school group, 16, 17, a boy with a phone and the terrible clarity of the young, spoke up before his teacher could stop him. He's not doing nothing, the boy said. You blew a horn in his ear and he didn't move. That's not nothing. That's kind of the hardest thing I've ever seen a person do. Delphine's smile flickered. You're a child, she said, which was both untrue and beside the point, and the crowd heard both of those things, and the tilt went a degree further from her. I will be honest that I loved that boy in that moment, loved him the plain way you love anyone who tells the truth into a wind that does not want it. But I did not look at him, because I was still at my post, and my post is to look forward. I filed his face for later. I would, in fact, meet him again, 3 weeks on, under very different light and shake his hand. But the gate was not the place. Delphine recovered the way her kind always recover, by raising the stakes. She had one asset left, the audience's belief that she was the fun one, the brave one, the one willing to poke the bear. And that belief only survives if the bear stays a bear. A bear that has quietly become the most dignified thing in the frame is a disaster for a woman whose whole trade is the poke. So she needed badly to make me react, to prove, retroactively, that all this had been worth watching, that the wall had a limit and she had found it. She stepped in one last time, and this time she did touch me in a way that was not a flick or a knuckle rap. She took hold of the strap of my rifle sling, where it crossed my chest, and she pulled not hard enough to move a trained man, but hard enough that the gesture was unmistakable on camera. A civilian, laying hands on a soldier's weapon at a royal gate. And that the hand on the sling was the legal mistake. That was the line that the man in the black car, and the sergeant of the guard, and eventually a magistrate, would all draw a very bright circle around. Because a great many things are permitted to a fool with a camera at a public gate, and laying hold of an armed guardsman's weapon is emphatically not one of them. But the law is slow, and the post is immediate, And I want to tell you what I did in the 2 seconds before the law arrived, because those 2 seconds are the whole story, and everything else is only the consequence of them. I looked at her. For the first time in 6 minutes, Corporal Tomas Vayne turned his eyes 18 inches to the left and looked directly into the lens she was holding, and directly past it at her. And I saw the flare of triumph go up in her face. She had it. She had the reaction. The wall had turned its head, and I let her have that half-second of thinking she'd won, because it made what came next so much heavier. Then I spoke one sentence. Level low, without heat, in the voice you use for a frightened animal or a lost tourist or anyone who has wandered somewhere they should not be. Please take your hand off my weapon, ma'am, I said. I would not want you to be hurt on my account. That was all. I want you to sit with the shape of it because Delphine did not, and that was her undoing. She heard at first only the surface, a wall that had finally spoken, a reaction captured, the content secured. For a quarter-second her face lit with the pure joy of a woman who has won her bet. She had made the statue talk. That was the clip. That was the whole day delivered. And then the words caught up with her, the way words do, a half-beat behind the sound of them. I would not want you to be hurt on my account. Not you're hurting me. Not take your hand off me. Not a single word about myself, my dignity, my rank, my medals, my anger. Nothing she could edit into a guardsman losing his temper. I had not defended myself. I had, in front of her 140,000 followers, expressed concern for her safety. I had, with her own hand still gripping my weapon, been kind to her. There is no editing that. You cannot cut it into arrogance. You cannot slow it down and find the flinch. There is no villain in the footage except the woman holding the phone, and the woman holding the phone had just been treated more gently than she had treated anyone in 6 minutes on camera by the man she had come to break. Her hand came off the sling as if the strap had gone hot. And in the silence that followed, a real silence now, the crowds, 100 people understanding all at once what they had watched, Delphine Marsh looked, for the first time all morning, exactly like what she was. A person who had gone somewhere she should not have gone, and been shown the way out with more courtesy than she deserved, and understood too late that the whole thing had been filmed. She fumbled the phone. Actually fumbled it, her thumb stabbing for the red button and missing, so that the camera kept rolling for 4 more seconds on her stricken face before she got it stopped. Those 4 seconds would matter enormously later, but she did not know that yet. All she knew, standing on the cobbles in her cream coat with the paper horn hanging limp in her other hand, was that she had lost, and that she did not entirely understand how, and that the man in the fur hat had gone back to looking forward as if she had never existed at all. Which at my post she had not, and now, having existed for 6 loud minutes, she had ceased to. The sergeant of the guard arrived 9 seconds later. His name was Sergeant Hollies, a broad, unhurried man who had stood these gates longer than I had been alive, and he had watched the last 30 seconds from the guardroom window, and he came across the forecourt at the particular walk that guardsmen use when they are not running, but very much wish you to understand they could. He did not raise his voice. Hollies never raised his voice. It was one of the many things I had learned from him. He positioned himself between Delphine and me, a wall of a different kind, and he addressed her with a courtesy so complete it was its own rebuke. "Madam," he said, "you've laid hands on a household soldier's weapon at a royal gate. I'll need your name, and I'll need you to wait with me by the guardroom until my duty officer has taken a statement. You're not under arrest, but you're not leaving the forecourt just yet either." "This is a public street," Delphine said, and the confidence tried to come back into her voice and could not find the door. "You can't detain me. I know my rights. I'm press." "You're welcome to be press," Holly said mildly. "The press don't put their hands on the rifles." "That's the one rule, madam. It's a short list and that's the whole of it." He gestured, not unkindly, toward the guardroom. "This way. The gentleman with the second camera as well, please." The man in the gray hood, Geo, had already begun to drift toward the edge of the crowd, and he stopped when Holly's named him, and the stopping told me everything about which of the two of them had understood the situation first. Gio had known the horn was a mistake. Gio had said careful. Gio had, I would learn, tried to talk her out of the whole segment in the car that morning. It did not save him from the statement, but it would, in the end, save his account when hers was gone. I stood my post. That is the thing people find hardest to believe when I tell it, that through all of this, the statement and the sergeant and the crowd and the pensioners murmuring and the school group boy grinning at what he'd said, I did not move from the granite step. My relief was not due for another 40 minutes, and until it came, the northeast gate was mine, and a man does not abandon a post because something interesting has happened at it. If anything, something interesting happening at it is the entire reason the post exists. So I looked forward, and I let the morning close back over the disturbance the way water closes over a dropped stone, and by the time the corporal of the relief came to take my place at 11, the forecourt was only a forecourt again, and the tourists were photographing the railing, and it might never have happened at all. Except that it had happened, and it had happened on 3 cameras, and one of those cameras belonged to a woman whose entire livelihood was the conversion of moments into clips, and who, even shaken, even stricken, even having just been shown mercy she did not want, could not stop herself from doing the only thing she knew how to do. She posted it. I did not see the post go up, of course. I was in the guardroom by then, out of the tunic, giving my own account to the duty officer, a young lieutenant named Ashcombe who took it all down with a careful hand, and asked me twice whether I wished to press a complaint about the hand on the sling. I said no. I said the sergeant had the matter, and the sergeant's judgment was better than mine. Ashcombe looked at me for a moment the way the school group boy had looked at Delphine and said, "You didn't say a word to her, Corporal." 6 minutes and 1 sentence. 1 sentence, I said. What was it? I told him. He wrote it down, and then he put his pen down and read it back to himself silently, and then he said, very quietly, "God, that's worse than anything you could have shouted, isn't it?" It wasn't meant to be worse, I said. It was meant to be true. But he was righter than I was, and the next 12 hours would prove it. Here is what Delphine Marsh did with her footage, and I lay it out because the machinery of her downfall is instructive, and because she built every gear of it herself with her own hands. She had a problem. The clip did not show what she needed it to show. It showed a woman being cruel to a still man and then being answered with a single line of kindness, and that is not a viral video in the direction she trafficked in. Her brand was the takedown. Her followers came to watch her win. A video of Delphine Marsh losing to a gate guard's 4-second mercy was not a video she could post as itself. So she cut it. She cut out the horn, she cut out the sling. She cut out, most fatally, the sentence, my actual sentence, the one about not wanting her hurt, and she replaced my voice with a caption that read, "Guard threatens influencer for asking questions." She cut it so that the clip opened on my turned head and my direct look into the lens, isolated from what caused it, so that a man who had been asked if he was a real person now appeared, contextless, to be a uniformed thug glaring down a brave young journalist. She added a trembling voiceover recorded in her car afterward. I felt genuinely unsafe. I was just doing my job. This is what happens when you hold power to account. And she posted it at 2 in the afternoon under the headline, "They never want you to see what really happens at those gates." It did what she wanted, for about 6 hours. By evening it had 4 million views and the comment section was a bonfire, and Delphine Marsh sat in her flat watching the numbers climb and believed, I am sure, that she had turned a disaster into her biggest day. The mercy had failed. The edit had saved her. The wall was now a villain and she was now a victim, and the internet, which loves a victim, was hers. She had made one error. She had made it out of the deepest habit of her trade, the habit that had served her 1,000 times and would destroy her once. She had assumed the footage was hers to control. She had assumed that because she held the camera, she held the story. But there had been 100 phones at the northeast gate that morning. And one of them belonged to the school group boy who had said the hardest thing he'd ever seen a person do. And his phone had caught all of it, the horn, the flick, the coward, the knuckles on the medals, the hand on the sling, and the sentence. The whole sentence in my own voice, clear as a bell. "Please take your hand off my weapon, ma'am. I would not want you to be hurt on my account." The boy's name was Milo Thorne. He was 17, and at 8:30 that evening, having watched Delphine Marsh's edited lie climb to 4 million views and having read the comments calling for a man he had watched be brave to be dismissed, disciplined, disgraced, Milo Thorne posted his own footage. Uncut. 90 seconds. No voiceover. No caption but 4 words of his own. Here is what happened. I have thought a great deal since about the difference between those two posts. Delphine's took a true thing and cut it into a lie. Milo's took the same true thing and simply refused to cut it at all. And the internet, which is a cruel and stupid and occasionally magnificent animal, looked at both of them side by side and chose the uncut one. Not because the internet is good, because the uncut one was more interesting. Because a woman being cruel to a still man and answered with mercy is a better story than a guard glaring at a journalist. And the crowd, whatever else it is, can smell the better story. By midnight, Milo's video had passed Delphine's. By dawn, it had passed it fivefold. And the comments underneath his were doing a thing that comments almost never do. They were going back to hers, finding the lie and marking it. But I am getting ahead of the post again, and there is a man in a black car I have not yet accounted for, and he matters more than the numbers. The car that had turned in at the far gate while Delphine was blowing her horn belonged to the household of Crown Prince Rowan. He had not been in it. That was his equerry, come to collect papers. But the equerry had seen the last of the business at the northeast gate through the car window, and the equerry was a man who reported things. And by that evening, the Crown Prince had heard a version of events. Crown Prince Rowan was not a man given to viral videos. He was the sort of heir the realm was quietly grateful for, steady, unshowy, more interested in the plumbing of the kingdom than its pageantry. He read reports. He remembered names. And he had, in the private way of a man who has grown up surrounded by guards and learned to actually see them, a particular regard for the men at the gates, whom most of his rank walked past as furniture. The very word Delphine had used, and the very habit of mind that the whole royal house, at its best, existed to correct. So when the equerry told him that a journalist had put her hand on a guardsman's rifle and been answered with a single sentence of kindness, and that the guardsman was a Cross of Valour man named Vayne, the Crown Prince did a thing that would, in its own quiet way, decide the entire matter. He asked to see the footage, not the edited one. He asked his people to find all of it, every phone, every angle, and to lay it before him unaltered before anyone in the palace press office was permitted to say a single word about the incident. This is the second discipline in this story, and I want to name it because it rhymes with mine. The palace press office wanted to respond. Their instinct, the moment Delphine's 4 million view lie began to circulate, was to put out a statement, a firm, corrective, defensive statement, and to do it fast, because in the modern world speed is thought to be the whole of wisdom. And the Crown Prince told them to wait. "Wait," he said. "Do not answer the lie. Do not argue with the woman. Do not put out a statement calling the video misleading, because a statement calling a video misleading only teaches the world that there is a video worth arguing about. Say nothing. Let the truth arrive on its own legs. And if it does not, if the lie wins and an honest man is disgraced, then we will act, and we will act completely. But give the truth 12 hours to be found before we spend the crown's credit defending it." It was, I have come to believe, exactly the institutional version of what I had done at the gate. Delphine had come to provoke a reaction. The palace's reaction was the harvest she was really after, the second and bigger crop, the spectacle of a wounded institution flailing to defend itself. And the Crown Prince, who understood provocation the way I understood it because he had spent his whole life being provoked, declined to give it. He held. He let the stillness be the answer. And the truth arrived on its own legs, exactly as he had wagered. Milo Thorne's uncut 90 seconds did what no palace statement could have done, precisely because it did not come from the palace. It came from a 17-year-old on a school trip, and it was believed for that reason. By the time the sun came up on the second day, the story had turned entirely over, and Delphine Marsh woke to find that the 4 million views she had gone to sleep triumphant over had become 4 million witnesses to her lie. I learned all of this later in pieces, most of it from the Crown Prince himself, though I did not know at the gate that any of it was happening. At the gate, and in the guardroom, and on the long walk home that evening past the shop windows where I did not once look at my own reflection, I knew only that a woman had blown a horn in my ear and that I had not moved, and that I had said one sentence, and that the sentence had been true. I did not know I was, at that moment, the most watched man in the kingdom. I would not have wanted to know. A man cannot stand a post if he is thinking about how he looks standing it. What I did do that evening, when I got home to the small flat with the single chair by the window, was take out the letter. I keep a letter in the drawer of the table by that chair, and I take it out perhaps twice a year, and I had a feeling that night was one of the nights for it. It was written in a hand that had grown shaky by the end of the war, by a sergeant named Aldous Wren, who had said to me on the worst night of my life the thing I had remembered at the gate, the thing about not becoming real for cruel people by breaking. He wrote the letter 3 years after that night from a hospital bed when he knew he was dying, and he wrote it to a small number of the men he had trained, and I was one of them, and I have never fully understood why I was one of them, and I have never stopped being grateful. The letter is not long. I will not copy all of it here. Some of it is between him and me and the dead. But there is one line in it that I read that night, sitting in the single chair with the horn still ringing faintly in my memory, and it is the line that had run under everything I did at the gate whether I knew it or not. He wrote, "They will call your stillness emptiness, because a full man frightens them and an empty one does not. Let them. The stillest thing in the world is a full cup carried without spilling. Anyone can be loud. Only a man with something in him can be quiet." I sat with that for a while. The city made its evening sounds. Somewhere out in the dark, 4 million strangers were arguing about a video of me, and I did not know it, and it would not have changed a thing about the letter or the chair or the quiet. Then I put the letter back in the drawer, and I went to bed, because I had the early shift at the northeast gate, and the northeast gate does not care what the internet thinks. It only cares whether you are there at 6, immaculate looking forward. I was there at 6. I was always there at 6. Now I must leave the gate for a while and tell you the part of the story I did not see, because a story about a humbling that only follows the man who was not humbled is only half a story. To understand what mercy did to Delphine Marsh, you have to stand where she stood, and I will try to stand there honestly, without gloating, because gloating is the very thing she had come to the gate to do, and I do not want to become her by telling her fall. She woke on the second morning to her phone already hot in her hand. That was the first sign. Delphine's phone was never merely warm, it was the engine of her life, and she slept with it beside her the way a soldier sleeps with a rifle. She had gone to bed at 4 million views and rising, victorious, and she woke to find the numbers on her own video stalled, and the numbers on a stranger's video. Some schoolboys, some Milo Thornes climbing past hers like a tide coming in over a sandcastle. She watched Milo's 90 seconds. She had to. You cannot look away from the thing that is eating you. She watched herself flick the bearskin and heard herself say coward and watched herself blow the paper horn and watched the still man not move, and then she heard in my voice, the voice she had cut out of her own version, the sentence. "Please take your hand off my weapon, ma'am. I would not want you to be hurt on my account." I have often wondered what it was like to hear that sentence for the second time in the wreckage, knowing what she had done to it. The first time, at the gate, she had heard only the surface and been briefly glad. Now she heard the whole of it, with the crowd of 4 million standing behind her hearing it too, and there was nowhere to put it. She could not argue with it. It was not an insult she could reframe or an attack she could survive by counterattacking. It was kindness, and you cannot fight kindness. You can only be measured against it, and she had cut it out of the record precisely because she had understood, on some animal level even at the gate, that beside it she looked like exactly what she was. The comments turned first, because comments are the weather of that world and the weather changes fast. By 8 in the morning, the top comment under her video, the edited one, read she cut out the part where he was nice to her. And beneath it, 10,000 agreements. By 9, the accounts that had shared her lie were quietly unsharing it. By 10, a rival of hers, a woman she had feuded with for a year, posted a side-by-side of the two videos with the single word oof, and that post did 3 million views, which is to say Delphine's humiliation was now more viral than her original lie had ever been. Then the sponsors began to leave, and that is a particular sound, the leaving of sponsors, a series of short polite emails that all say the same thing in the same words. In light of recent events, we've decided to pause our partnership, and each of them is a small door closing until the sum of them is a house with no doors at all. This was the false dawn, though she did not know it was false, and neither, if I am honest, did I when I first heard of it, because for about 6 hours in the middle of that second day, it looked as though the matter would simply end there. The lie exposed, the woman disgraced, the honest man vindicated, the sponsors fled. A clean karmic ledger, balanced and closed. The internet loves a balanced ledger. It had its villain punished and its still man praised, and it began already to look for the next thing. And it would have ended there, tidily, if that had been the kind of story the Crown Prince wanted it to be. But it was not, and the reason it was not is the deepest thing in this whole account, and I did not understand it until I was standing in the room where it turned. Because here is what a tidy ending would have missed. A tidy ending punishes Delphine Marsh and calls it justice, but I had not, at the gate, been trying to punish Delphine Marsh. I had been trying not to become the thing she had decided I was. Those are different projects. The internet's project was punishment. Mine had been dignity. And the Crown Prince, who had watched all the footage and read my one sentence and asked to know what kind of man had said it, understood that a punishment ending would quietly convert my dignity into her cruelty's mirror image. The mob doing to her exactly what she had done to me, and calling it justice because the target had changed. He did not want that. And so, on the afternoon of the second day, when Delphine Marsh had lost her sponsors and her standing, and I am told, sat in her flat in the cream coat she had not taken off, watching the ledger of her life be balanced against her by 4 million strangers. On that afternoon, a letter arrived at her door by hand, on paper heavy enough to feel like a summons, bearing a crest she recognized because everyone in the kingdom recognized it. It was an invitation to the palace. She did not know I would be there. I did not myself know why I had been summoned. I received my own version of the letter through the sergeant, an order to present myself in dress uniform at the East Receiving Room at 4 o'clock the following day, no reason given, which in the Guard is the most ordinary and most alarming kind of order there is. Delphine spent the night, I have no doubt, imagining the worst, a public dressing down, cameras, the Crown itself descending to grind her into the cobbles she had strutted on. Her whole life had taught her that power, when you cross it, comes for you loudly. She had built her career on the assumption that everyone in a position of authority was one provocation away from behaving as badly as she did. She could not imagine an authority that would do anything other than what she would have done with the same power. She was about to be shown, in a quiet room, on no camera at all, an authority entirely unlike the one she had spent her life provoking. and it would humble her more completely than any punishment could have. Because you cannot rebuild your identity around being a victim of people who decline to be cruel to you. But before the room, there was one more night at the gate, and one more thing happened there that I have to tell, because it is the hinge of the whole matter and I have held it back until now. On the evening of the second day, as I came off shift, a woman was waiting for me outside the guardroom, not Delphine, an older woman, 60 perhaps, in a plain coat, with the particular stillness of a person who has decided to do a hard thing and is holding herself to it. She stopped me on the pavement and asked, very simply, if I was the guardsman from the video, and when I said I was, she told me she was Delphine Marsh's mother. I confess I did not, for a moment, know what to do with that. A guard learns to read a face for threat, and there was no threat in hers, only a great and careful sorrow, and something underneath it that I recognized because I had worn it myself, the shame of loving someone who has done a shameful thing. "I'm not here to defend her," she said before I could speak. "I saw the whole video, the real one, the boys." She said the boys the way you say a thing you have watched too many times. "I'm here because I heard what you said, the sentence." She looked at me steadily. "You said you didn't want her to be hurt, on camera, with her hand on your gun." Her voice did not break, but it thinned the way a wire thins under a weight. "Nobody said anything like that about my daughter in a long time. She hasn't let them. She's built her whole life so that no one gets close enough to be kind to her, because kindness has a way of finding the soft part, and she decided a long time ago she couldn't afford a soft part." She stopped. "I don't know why I'm telling you this. I suppose I wanted to thank the one person this week who treated her like she was worth not hurting." I did not know what to say, so I said the truth. "I wasn't being kind to be clever, ma'am. I only meant it. She was in a place she shouldn't have been, and people who are somewhere they shouldn't be get hurt. I didn't want that for her. That's the whole of it." The woman looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That's worse, you know. That you meant it." Which was the third time in 2 days someone had told me that my sincerity was crueler than any cruelty would have been, and by now I was beginning to believe it, and to understand something about the world I had not fully grasped in 11 years at the gate, that a genuinely kind word, spoken without heat to someone who has staked their whole life on the assumption that no such word will ever come, does not comfort them. It indicts them. It shows them, in one line, the entire cost of the armor they have chosen, and there is nothing on earth harder to forgive than the person who makes you see that. She left me on the pavement with that, and I walked home in the dark, past the shop windows, and this time I did look at my reflection once briefly, and saw a tired man in a bearskin, and thought about a daughter who had built a life so that no one could be kind to her, and about the mercy that had gone through that armor like water finds a crack. And I understood that whatever happened in the East receiving room the next day, the real reckoning had already happened, on the cobbles in 4 seconds. And everything else was only the long echo of it. At 6 the next morning I was at the gate, immaculate, looking forward. The gray light came up over the railing exactly as it had come up 10,000 mornings before. And at 4 o'clock that afternoon, in dress uniform, I would walk into a room where a woman who had built her whole life against kindness was about to be shown more of it than she could survive. The East receiving room at Harrogate is not a grand room. That surprises people. The grand rooms are for state visits and portraits. The East receiving room is where the household does its quiet business, and it is furnished for conversation rather than awe, a long table of dark wood, a scatter of chairs, tall windows giving onto the private garden, a fire laid but not lit. I had stood guard outside its door many times. I had never been inside it. A guardsman is the furniture of such rooms, as Delphine would have said, and the furniture does not sit down. I arrived at 10 to 4 and was shown in by a footman, and the room was empty except for one man, standing at the window with his back to the door, looking out at the garden with his hands clasped behind him, and I knew him at once from the set of his shoulders because I had watched those shoulders through 100 ceremonies. Crown Prince Rowan turned as I came in, and I came to attention, and he did a thing that undid some small careful knot in my chest. He crossed the room and offered me his hand, as one man offers another, and said, "Corporal Vayne, thank you for coming. Please, there's no ceremony here today. I asked you rather than ordered you, whatever the letter said." Sergeant Holly has a talent for making an invitation sound like a firing squad. "Yes, sir," I said, because it was true, and because I did not yet know what any of this was. "Sit if you'll sit. I know it goes against everything they've trained into you. A flicker of something like humor. You'll have to forgive the household its little cruelties. We spend so much of our lives standing that we can't help asking the people around us to sit, just to prove it's still allowed." I sat on the edge of the chair, because a man does not lounge before the air, and he sat across from me, and for a moment he simply looked at me. Not the way Delphine had looked at me, hunting for a reaction, but the way you look at a thing you have thought about and want to see plainly at last. "I've watched the footage," he said, "all of it, the boys, which is complete, and the others. I've watched it more times than is probably healthy." He paused. "I want to tell you why, not to flatter you. You'd hate that, I think, and it would be beneath both of us." He leaned forward slightly. "I've spent my whole life being provoked, Corporal. Not with paper horns, with subtler things, but the same shape. People who want a reaction from me because the reaction is worth something to them. A photograph of the heir losing his temper. A quote. A flinch. I learned very young that the flinch is the whole transaction, that they don't actually want me, they want the thing they can take from me if I break. And I learned to hold. My father taught me. I imagine yours or someone taught you." "A sergeant, sir," I said. "Aldous Wren, he's gone now." "Aldous Wren," the Crown Prince repeated, as if filing it the way I had filed Milo Thorne's face. "Then I owe Aldous Wren a debt, because his lesson stood at my gate this week and made the whole kingdom look at what discipline actually is." He sat back. "Do you know what struck me most? Not that you didn't flinch. Men don't flinch, that's the job, and the world takes it for granted. What struck me was the sentence. Because a man holding his composure, that's discipline, and it's admirable, but it's fundamentally defensive. You held the wall, fine, but then you did something a wall cannot do. You spoke, and you did not defend yourself, and you did not attack her, and you did not even mention yourself. You expressed concern for her welfare, with her hand on your weapon." He shook his head slowly. "That's not defense, Corporal. That's the opposite of it. That's the most generous thing I have ever seen a provoked man do, and you did it in 4 seconds in front of 4 million people, and you did it, this is the part I keep coming back to, you did it without any idea it would be seen. You thought it was just her and you and a paper horn. You'd have said it to an empty street." "I would, sir," I said. "It was true whether anyone saw it or not." "Yes," he said quietly. "That's exactly it, that's the whole of it, and that is why I asked you here." He glanced at the clock. "There's a second person coming to this room in a few minutes, and I want to prepare you, because you may not thank me for it. And if you'd rather not be part of what I'm about to do, you may say so now and go, and there'll be no mark against you. I brought Delphine Marsh here." I said nothing. I had suspected it on the walk over, and hearing it confirmed only settled the suspicion into fact. "The world has done to her exactly what she did to you," the Crown Prince went on. "It took a true thing about her that she was cruel at my gate, and it has been sharpening that true thing into a weapon all week. She's lost her livelihood. She'll lose more before it's done. And every instinct of the crowd, and I'll be honest, some instinct in me says, let her. She earned it. That's justice." He looked at me. "But it isn't quite, is it? Because if we let the mob finish her, then the lesson the whole kingdom takes from this week is that the way to win is to be crueler and louder than the other person. And that is the precise opposite of the lesson you taught at the gate. You didn't win by being crueler than her. You won by declining to be cruel at all. And I will not let the ending of your story betray the middle of it." The fire was not lit, but the room felt warm, the particular warmth of a thing being said that badly needed saying. "So here is what I intend," he said. "I've asked her here, and I've asked you here, And I'm not going to give her a lecture or a punishment, because she's had a week of both and they've taught her nothing except that she was right to armor up. I'm going to do the one thing that has any chance of reaching the person under the brand. I'm going to let her sit in a room with the man she wronged. And I'm going to let that man be exactly as decent to her, in private, with no camera, as he was at the gate. And then I'm going to let her leave, unpunished, unlectured, with no requirement of any kind, and see what a person does with mercy when it's the last thing on earth they know how to accept. He stood. I can't order you to be kind to her, Corporal. Kindness ordered isn't kindness. So I'm asking, will you sit in this room and be the man you were at the gate, or would you rather go? I thought about the letter in my drawer, and about the mother on the pavement, and about the still cup carried without spilling. I'll stay, sir, I said. He nodded once, and I understood that some part of him had wagered on that answer, the way he had wagered on the truth arriving on its own legs, and won again. The footman opened the door, and Delphine Marsh came in. She was not the woman from the gate. That was the first thing. The cream coat was gone, replaced by something dark and plain, and the red lipstick was gone, and with them had gone the whole architecture of the performer, the tilt of the chin, the aim of the shoulders, the way she had angled herself toward invisible lenses. Without the camera to organize her, she seemed smaller and older and human in the unbearable way that people become human when the thing they used to hide behind has been taken away. She had been crying recently and had stopped, and had arrived at that hollowed-out flatness that comes after crying, when there is nothing left to do but be seen. She saw me first. Her eyes found me before they found the crown prince, which told me where her fear was aimed, and I watched her flinch, she, who had come to make me flinch, at the mere sight of the man she had wronged. She had come into the room braced for me, braced for my revenge, my gloating, my 4 seconds of the mercy she had cut out now finally curdled into the payback she believed was owed. Miss Marsh, the crown prince said gently, please sit. She sat like a woman being sentenced. Tell you why you're here, he said, because I think the not knowing is its own cruelty and you've had enough of that. You are not here to be punished. There is no camera, there is no press. Nothing said in this room will leave it unless you choose to let it. I have no requirement of you and no threat to make. You may stand up and walk out at any moment and nothing will follow you out the door. He let that sit. I asked you here for one reason. This is Corporal Tomas Vayne. He is the man you mocked at my gate. And I wanted you to be able to say to him, or hear from him, whatever the two of you might need to say and hear. Once, in private as people, before the world turns your whole encounter into something neither of you will recognize. Delphine looked at me. I saw her try to find the performer, reach for the reflex, some line, some deflection, some sharp thing to say to take control of the room, and I saw it fail. There was nothing to grip. You cannot perform contempt at a man who has already expressed concern for your safety. The contempt has nowhere to stand. You must hate me, she said finally. Her voice was small. It was, I realized, the first entirely sincere thing I had heard her say. I would hate me. I do hate me a little this week. A thin, awful attempt at a laugh. So go on. You've earned it. Say the thing, whatever the thing is. She lifted her chin, and for a moment I saw the ghost of the woman at the gate, offering her own throat as if being hated were at least a role she knew how to play. I put my hand on your gun. I called you a coward. I cut you into a villain and I lied to 4 million people about you. Say the thing. And this was the moment. I understood it as it arrived, the way you understand at the gate that the next second is the one that matters. She wanted me to say the thing. She wanted the payback because payback was familiar. It fit the shape of the world she had built, the world where everyone is one provocation from cruelty and armor is the only sane response. If I gave her contempt, I would confirm her whole life. I would prove her right. She would walk out of this room wounded but intact, her belief in the badness of people reinforced, her armor thicker than ever, and nothing would have changed except the tally. So I did not give her the thing. I looked at her the way I had looked at her at the gate, directly, without heat. And I said the only true thing I had, which was not about the video, and not about the lie, and not about my medals or my honor or the 4 million. I don't hate you, Miss Marsh, I said. I've been thinking about something your mother said to me last night. Whatever she had braced for, it was not that. Her face came apart at the word mother. Not dramatically, just a small collapse at the center of it, the look of a person struck somewhere they did not know was still soft. She came to the guardroom, I said. She wasn't there to defend you, she was there to thank me for the sentence, and she told me something. She told me you'd built your life so that no one could get close enough to be kind to you, because kindness finds the soft part, and you decided a long time ago you couldn't afford a soft part. I kept my voice level, the gate voice, the voice for someone who has wandered somewhere they should not be. I don't know if that's true, I don't know you. But I know what it's like to be told your stillness is emptiness. People looked at me for 11 years and saw furniture, a wall. Nothing behind the eyes. You said it yourself. And it isn't emptiness, Miss Marsh. It's a full cup carried without spilling. And I think I could be wrong. I think you know something about carrying a full cup and calling it empty so no one asks you to share it. She was crying now, silently, the way people cry when they have run out of the strength to hide it. The Crown Prince said nothing. The fire was not lit and the room was very still. I said I didn't want you to be hurt, I went on, because I didn't. That wasn't a line. I'm not clever enough for lines. You were somewhere you shouldn't have been with your hand on a weapon in front of a crowd, and I've seen what happens to people who put their hands where they shouldn't, and I didn't want it for you. That's all it was. It's still all it is. I don't want you hurt. Not by me, and not by 4 million strangers, and not by whatever it is that made you decide the only safe way to live is to hurt other people first. I stopped. I had said more words in that room than I had said at the gate in 11 years, and I found I was done. That's the thing, Miss Marsh. That's the whole thing. There isn't a crueler one underneath it. There was a long silence. And then Delphine Marsh, who had come to Harrogate Palace braced for a punishment she could survive, put her face in her hands and wept for the punishment she could not, which was mercy, offered twice, by a man she had done everything in her power to earn the hatred of, and who declined gently to hate her. That is what humbled her, not the lost sponsors, not the 4 million witnesses, not the disgrace or the exposure or the side-by-side videos. Those had only wounded the brand. What broke through to the person underneath, what finally actually humbled Delphine Marsh, was being carried in a quiet room on no camera, more gently than she had ever carried anyone, by the one man on earth entitled to drop her. You cannot build an identity around being a victim of people who refuse to be cruel to you. There is no armor for it. It goes straight through. The Crown Prince let her weep. He did not fill the silence, did not comfort her, did not hurry it, and I understood that this, too, was a discipline, the same one I stood at the gate, the discipline of letting a hard, true thing complete itself rather than smoothing it over. When at last she lifted her face, red and wrecked, and for the first time entirely without performance, he spoke, and what he said was brief. "You may go now, Miss Marsh," he said. "No one will follow you out. What you do next is entirely yours." He paused. "I'll only say this. The kingdom watched a man decline to be cruel this week, and it turned out to be the most powerful thing anyone had done in years. You are in a rare position. You have 4 million people who have watched you be cruel and are now watching to see what you become. Most people never get a second act that large. I'd think carefully about what to build in it." He inclined his head, the smallest possible bow, more courtesy than she had shown anyone all week. "That's all. Thank you for coming." She stood. At the door she stopped and turned and looked at me one last time, and I braced, old habit, for a final barb, the performer's reflex to leave with a line. But there was no line left in her. She only said very quietly, "Thank you for not saying the thing," and then she was gone, and the footman closed the door, and the east receiving room was 2 men again and an unlit fire. The Crown Prince let out a breath. "Well," he said, "I've no idea whether that worked. That's the trouble with mercy, you never get to see the ledger balance. You just have to do it and let go of the wanting to know. He looked at me with something that was almost rude. You're better at that than I am, Corporal. The letting go, I keep the reports. You just go back to the gate. The gate doesn't care what I want, sir, I said. It only cares that I'm there at 6. He laughed at that, a real laugh, and clapped me once on the shoulder, and that was, I thought, the end of it. It was not quite the end of it. There is a coda, and I will give it to you plainly, because it is the part that let me sleep. Delphine Marsh did not vanish, and she did not double down, and she did not, as a certain kind of person does, reinvent herself as a martyr. She went quiet for 2 months, and then she posted one video, the last one as it turned out on that account, before she closed it. It was the uncut footage, Milo Thorne's 90 seconds, reposted with her own name on it, under a caption that read, "This is what I actually did, and this is the man I did it to, and he was kinder to me than I have been to anyone." She named no excuse. She asked for nothing. She simply put the true thing back where she had once put the lie and let it stand. I am told it was the most watched thing she ever made. I would not know. I did not watch it. A man cannot stand a post if he is thinking about how he looks standing it, and by then I had gone back to looking forward, which is the whole of the job, described honestly. Milo Thorne I did meet again. 3 weeks after the gate, the Crown Prince arranged a small thing, no cameras, of course. The household had learned the value of no cameras, and I shook the hand of the 17-year-old who had refused to cut the truth, and I told him that his 4 words, "Here is what happened," had done more for honor in the kingdom than any statement the palace could have made, precisely because they had not come from the palace. He blushed and said he'd only done the obvious thing, and I told him that the obvious thing is the hardest thing there is, which is why almost no one does it, and that he should remember he had done it when he was young, because it would be useful to him to know, later in life, that he was the kind of man who did. As for me, I am still at the northeast gate. I stand my post, on the granite step worn shallow by 100 years of men who stood where I stand, and I look forward, and the tourists photograph me, and now and again one of them recognizes me, the guard from the video, the one who was kind to the journalist, and they lower their phones and step back a respectful pace, and I feel the small change that the whole business made in the way the public sees the men at the gates. Not a wall, not furniture, a full cup, carried without spilling. I keep the letter in the drawer still. I take it out perhaps twice a year. And when I read the line about the stillness, that they will call it emptiness because a full man frightens them and an empty one does not, I think now of a woman in a cream coat with a paper horn, and of the 4 seconds that undid her, not because they were cruel, but because they were not. And I understand at last the whole of what old Aldous Wren was trying to give me on the worst night of my life. He was not teaching me how to withstand cruelty. Anyone can withstand cruelty, you only have to endure. He was teaching me the far harder thing, how to answer it without becoming it, how to be provoked and stay whole, how to hold the cup so full, so level, so long, that when the moment finally comes to set it down in front of the person who swore it was empty, the pouring out of it is gentler than anything they have ever been shown, and truer than anything they can survive. That is the discipline, that is the honor, that is the whole of the post described honestly. I look forward, I am there at 6. I am always there at 6.